Imagine a prison so perfectly constructed that no one tries to escape. A place without guards, without walls, without visible chains, just a steady stream of comfort. Entertainment at your fingertips, pleasures on demand, distractions so immersive that the thought of leaving never even occurs. No one forces you to stay, but you do. Not because you're trapped, but because you're comfortable. That's the world Aldous Huxley warned us about. Not a society enslaved by fear, but one sedated by pleasure. In his vision, it wasn't soldiers who kept the people in line. It was distractions, endless amusement, shallow joy masking deep emptiness. In Brave New World, he didn't imagine a future of tyrants and torture. He saw something far more dangerous. People so busy feeling good, they stopped thinking. They stopped asking questions. They stopped noticing what they were losing. And what they were losing was themselves. Decades ago, Huxley wrote about a future where truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance, where books would disappear, not because they were burned, but because no one cared to read. A future where silence would be terrifying, because it would mean no more noise to cover the emptiness. Look around. Is this not the world we live in now? We swipe, we scroll, we binge, we numb. But underneath the noise, something is missing. And maybe you've felt it too. That quiet ache beneath all the comfort. That sense that something real is slipping away. So the question isn't whether Huxley was right. The question is, how far into his prophecy have we already traveled? Because if he saw this coming, what else did he see? What did he actually predict? And why does it matter now more than ever? Before dystopia became a cliché in entertainment, Aldous Huxley was already warning us. But unlike other prophetic voices of his era, he didn't focus on war, surveillance, or violent oppression. Huxley imagined something far more subtle and far more dangerous. A society that wouldn't need to be forced into submission, because it would willingly sedate itself. Born into a family of thinkers and scientists, Huxley wasn't just a novelist. He was a visionary, someone who understood how ideas could be used to shape entire civilizations. In Brave New World, published nearly a century ago, he described a future where control didn't come through fear. It came through pleasure. While George Orwell warned of a world ruled by force and censorship, Huxley feared a world where truth would be drowned in entertainment, where people would no longer fight for freedom because they'd be too distracted to notice they lost it. And that's what makes his vision so terrifying. It didn't rely on a villain. There was no tyrant, no dictator, no dark figure behind the curtain. The enemy was comfort, stability, predictability. The people in Huxley's world weren't screaming for help. They were smiling because they were chemically, emotionally, and psychologically kept content. And that's where the warning becomes real for us. Because we're not afraid of comfort. We crave it. We build our lives around it. But in doing so, we forget that the same things that numb our pain also numb our potential. Huxley wasn't predicting machines or robots or war. He was predicting a world where people would stop asking questions because they'd be too busy watching, swiping, laughing, scrolling, and mistaking all of that for life. They told you freedom meant doing whatever you want, eating what you crave, watching what you like, buying what makes you feel good. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Pleasure is not freedom. In fact, it's often the very thing that enslaves you. Because when everything feels good, you stop noticing what's real. You stop noticing what's missing. You chase dopamine like it's a compass, thinking that the next rush, the next click, the next hit of instant gratification will finally make the emptiness go away. But it doesn't. It never does. That's because freedom isn't about how much pleasure you can consume. It's about how much truth you're willing to face. And truth is rarely comfortable. Huxley understood this long before the science caught up. He saw a future where people would no longer need to be coerced. They'd be so immersed in comfort, they'd willingly give up their autonomy. Because who questions the system when the system feels good? Who demands answers when their brain is already soothed by the endless scroll, the curated feed, the constant stimulation designed not to inform, but to pacify? And yet, this is where the illusion becomes dangerous. Because the more satisfied you are on the surface, the less likely you are to look deeper. To ask, why am I still tired? Or, why do I feel numb even after a day full of enjoyment? That numbness isn't random. It's a symptom. The cost of confusing stimulation with purpose. And here's the darkest part. Once you're caught in the loop of feel good, now think later, you begin to mistake submission for happiness. You start calling your cage a sanctuary. You defend the very habits that drain you. You say, it's just one more episode. It's just a way to relax. It helps me unwind, without asking why you need to escape in the first place. That's the brilliance and the trap of pleasure. It doesn't come with warning signs. It doesn't raise alarms. It rewards you for staying exactly where you are. And every time you give in, every time you choose comfort over clarity, the illusion grows stronger. The bars of the cage become softer, more invisible, but they're still bars. And if you never question them, you may never realize you're no longer free. You were never meant to live for comfort alone. You were meant to grow, to stretch, to struggle towards something real. But pleasure, unchecked, unexamined, steals that from you quietly. It offers you peace without depth, joy without roots. And over time, that kind of joy becomes hollow. Huxley's warning wasn't just about society. It was about your mind, your choices, your inner compass. If you never ask where the pleasure is leading you, you might find out too late that it already led you away from yourself. What if your thoughts weren't fully yours? What if your choices, what to watch, what to eat, what to click, were less about freedom and more about chemistry? This is where Huxley's forgotten warning meets the modern world. Not through fiction, but through the science of dopamine. Every time you get a like, a notification, a flash of entertainment, you get a hit, a tiny reward from your brain that says, do that again. And so you do. Not because it fulfills you, but because it stimulates you. And here's the catch. Stimulation is not the same as satisfaction. The more you chase those little highs, the more your brain adapts. What once gave you joy now feels normal. What used to excite you becomes dull. So you scroll faster, watch more, swipe harder, all in search of something you can't quite name. It's not addiction in the obvious sense. There are no needles or pills, but the effect is eerily similar. You're being rewired, not by force, but by feedback. And those systems, the ones built to trigger you, were designed that way. Not for your growth, not for your clarity, but for your attention. Because attention is currency. And the longer you stay hooked, the more valuable you become, not as a person, but as a product. Huxley didn't know about algorithms or push notifications, but he understood the core principle. Control people by controlling what they crave. When comfort becomes currency, manipulation becomes invisible. You don't have to be watched if you can be seduced. You don't have to be threatened if you're entertained. You'll stay exactly where you are, not because you're forced, but because you're rewarded. That's the new form of control. And it works because it feels good. But here's what they don't tell you. Every hit has a cost. Every mindless escape leaves a residue. You may not feel it immediately, but slowly, you begin to forget how to focus, how to sit still, how to think deeply. You lose not your freedom all at once, but piece by piece. And the scariest part is, most people won't even notice until there's nothing left to notice at all. You were never built to chase pleasure. You were built to seek meaning. And yet, almost everything around you pushes you to forget that. You wake up and reach for the screen. You scroll through highlights, distractions, perfectly filtered lives. You're surrounded by content designed to give you everything, except depth. And that's not by accident. Meaning takes effort. It asks you to struggle, to confront what's broken, to search for something real, even when it hurts. But pleasure? Pleasure is easy. It asks for nothing. It just gives and takes, quietly, slowly, until one day you wake up and wonder why you feel so hollow, despite having everything that should make you happy. This is the modern crisis. A generation with more access, more entertainment, more convenience than ever before, yet overwhelmed, anxious, and starved for something real. Because you cannot binge your way to purpose. You cannot scroll your way into identity. And you cannot pleasure your way out of pain. Viktor Frankl, who survived one of the darkest moments in human history, said that life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by a lack of meaning. And yet, meaning has become rare, unmarketable, replaced by the next quick fix. But deep down, you feel it, that hunger for something real, something hard-earned, something that doesn't fade the moment you put your phone down. That's what Huxley feared we would forget, that we'd trade fulfillment for convenience, that we'd choose to feel good rather than become good. And we've done exactly that. We've built systems that reward avoidance, that make pain look like failure and discomfort feel like weakness. But pain is not the enemy. It's a signal, a doorway, a compass pointing you back to what matters. If pleasure says escape, meaning says enter. Enter the discomfort. Enter the silence. Enter the truth you've been avoiding. Because what you're really seeking isn't pleasure at all. It's purpose. And purpose doesn't sedate you. It sets you on fire. You don't need chains to control people anymore. You don't need threats or guards or locked doors. All you need is comfort, enough convenience, enough distraction, and most will stay exactly where they are, even if something inside them knows it's wrong. History once relied on force to maintain power. But today, control has become elegant, invisible, wrapped in the glow of a screen and the promise of ease. bread and circuses. Only now, the bread is processed, and the circus fits in your pocket. The more comfortable people become, the less they question, the less they move, the less they resist. That's the quiet brilliance of modern systems. They don't fight you. They feed you. They give you everything you want, until you no longer remember what you need. You stop asking if you're free, because it feels like you are. You can go anywhere, say anything, buy whatever makes you feel good in the moment. But beneath that freedom is something more hollow. When your every desire is met instantly, you lose the ability to wait, to work, to struggle. And without struggle, there is no growth. And without growth, there is no power. Only passive consumption. And a passive population is easy to manage. You don't need to ban information if no one cares to seek it. You don't need to censor truth if no one's looking for it. Just keep them distracted. Keep them scrolling. Keep them feeling just good enough to forget that something feels wrong. That's the price of comfort. Not in dollars, but in awareness. And that's exactly what Huxley predicted. A society that wouldn't fall by force, but would collapse softly, quietly, with a smile. When people imagine collapse, they think of noise, of crumbling buildings, panicked crowds, flashing lights. But the real collapse? It's quiet. It happens slowly, gently, almost politely. Not through violence, but through apathy. Not with an explosion, but with silence. This is the collapse Huxley saw coming. Not the collapse of infrastructure, but the collapse of the human spirit, the erosion of curiosity, the death of depth. In the past, civilizations fell when invaders arrived at the gates. But today, the invader is already inside. It lives in your habits, in your screen time, in the parts of your life you've stopped questioning. When Rome began to fall, it wasn't just because of foreign threats. It was because the people lost the will to maintain what made them great. They stopped thinking. They stopped innovating. They prioritized pleasure over principle, bread over discipline, distraction over responsibility. And so the collapse didn't begin at the edges. It began at the center. That same pattern plays out today, not on battlefields, but in bedrooms, in classrooms, in conversations that never go deeper than a headline, in a generation trained to react, but not to reflect. This is what Huxley feared most. A world where people would choose comfort so consistently, so unconsciously, that one day they'd wake up to find that the foundation beneath them had disappeared. And by then, rebuilding would feel too hard, too inconvenient, too uncomfortable. So the soft collapse continues, fed not by chaos, but by neglect. Neglect of thought, neglect of effort, neglect of everything that gives life its weight. And the most dangerous part? It's not just happening out there. It's happening in you. Every time you silence that quiet voice inside that says something's off. Every time you avoid the hard question. Every time you trade your attention for another dopamine hit. Civilization doesn't collapse in one moment. It dissolves slowly. Every time we choose ease over awareness. Pain is not the enemy. It never was. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that pain was something to run from, to hide, to numb. But what if pain was trying to tell you something? What if it was a signal, not of weakness, but of life? In a world where comfort is king, pain becomes the one thing we fear the most. We silence it with distractions, bury it with entertainment, dull it with consumption. But pain, real pain, does not vanish when ignored. It waits, and when it returns, it does so with a question. Are you listening now? Huxley's vision was terrifying, not because it imagined a world full of suffering, but because it imagined a world where suffering had been erased, and with it, the very thing that makes us human. To feel pain is to feel deeply, and to feel deeply is the root of meaning. Pain is how we grow. It's how we learn. It's how we connect with others who have suffered and survived. Viktor Frankl understood this when he said that suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. In other words, the pain that breaks you can also rebuild you if you choose to face it. But here's the truth. Most people won't. They'll stay in the numbness. They'll settle for feeling less because feeling nothing feels safer than facing everything. But you? If you've made it this far, something inside you is already choosing a different path. A path where pain is not your enemy, but your teacher. A path where struggle is not a flaw, but a fire. The kind of fire that burns away the lies you were told about comfort and reveals the truth. That meaning doesn't come from avoiding pain, but from embracing it. Not blindly, not masochistically, but courageously, intentionally. Because when you stop running from pain, you stop running from yourself. And that is the beginning of everything. You were never meant to be tame. Somewhere beneath the silence, the compliance, the constant need to be okay, there's something fierce in you. A version of yourself that doesn't flinch when discomfort rises, that doesn't apologize for existing, that doesn't shrink to make others feel secure. But that version of you has been buried under expectation, under sedation, under the idea that being agreeable is the same as being good. It's not. Huxley didn't warn us about villains in the shadows. He warned us about the slow erosion of our edges, the turning of strong minds into softened silhouettes. But you don't need to stay that way. Becoming dangerous again doesn't mean becoming violent. It means becoming sovereign. Knowing what you think, why you think it, and refusing to trade your awareness for approval. It means being able to say no without guilt, to walk away without explanation, to feel everything, and still choose your own path. That kind of presence is rare. That kind of mind cannot be manipulated. That kind of spirit is dangerous to systems that rely on your silence. So ask yourself, who benefits from you staying numb? Who profits from your distraction? Who feels safe when you doubt yourself? And then ask this: what would change if you stopped asking for permission? If you stopped hiding your voice? If you remembered that the version of you who refuses to be sedated is the version of you the world actually needs? If you're done being manageable, write it in the comments. I choose clarity. Let them know you're waking up. Let them feel the shift. Waking up isn't the end. It's the beginning. Because once you see the cage, once you realize that comfort was the leash and pleasure was the blindfold, you can't go back. But awareness doesn't come with instructions. Now you have to walk through a world designed to keep you asleep while staying awake. And that's the real challenge. Not to open your eyes, but to keep them open. To resist the pull of sedation when no one else notices they're drowning. To build a life rooted in clarity while the rest of the world chases numbness. This is the path of the outlier. And the further you walk it, the more the illusion around you starts to break. But here's the truth. Some of what you see next won't be beautiful. In fact, it may make you question everything, especially when you realize this isn't just a distraction. It's a constructed dream, a waking dream, lived with your eyes wide open. And if you want to understand what that really means, watch the next video. Because what you're living in may not be reality. Not yet.